while before ever responding to Katt Williams.
Well, see, first of all, I ain't really good at social media, so I didn't even know that was out there. But they can, like, really kiss most of the corners of my ass when you say stuff like that. First of all, man, let me say this. If I had a chance to talk to Katt about anything, I would just ask him what's wrong. Just what's wrong. Let's go to that. Listen to me, man. Just because a person sits on a show and don't hesitate or say or and speaks eloquently, that don't mean it's true.
When people talk about radio legends, the name Steve Harvey always comes up. Steve Harvey built his empire around the Steve Harvey Morning Show, bragging about his 9 million listeners and his status as the #1 morning voice for adults 25 to 54. Over and over, Steve Harvey reminds his audience that he's governed by FCC rules, unlike podcast hosts who can say anything without consequences. But the moment Steve Harvey brings this up, fans see it differently. To them, Steve Harvey sounds like a man clinging to an old system, a man who doesn't understand how the new world of podcasts and unfiltered interviews works. The contradiction is loud. While Steve Harvey insists you must protect your brand, critics point out that he has spent years profiting from messy conversations, harsh advice, and controversial takes. And then there's Katt Williams. The viral interview that Katt Williams gave didn't just make headlines, it shifted the culture. In that sit-down, Katt Williams spoke boldly, directly, and without hesitation. He didn't stumble, he didn't pause, he didn't sugarcoat. And when millions watched, they saw something that felt raw and authentic. That's why it spread like wildfire. When the dust settled, everyone waited for Steve Harvey to respond. But Steve Harvey stayed silent, and when he finally did, it wasn't strength, it was sensitivity. He admitted he hadn't seen it at first because he wasn't active on social media. But when he caught wind of it, Steve Harvey said if he sat down with Katt Williams, his first question would be, "What's wrong with you?" He painted Katt Williams as jealous, bitter, and grieving, but the internet flipped it back on him. To fans, it wasn't Katt Williams who looked bitter, it was Steve Harvey. It was Steve Harvey who seemed unable to move past that viral moment, still wounded, still taking shots years later. Critics laughed at how Steve Harvey called others jealous, while his own career had been littered with rumors of him stepping on others to rise. That's where Bernie Mac's name re-enters the conversation. Everyone remembers the original Kings of Comedy. Everyone remembers that night belonged to Bernie Mac, not Steve Harvey. Bernie Mac's set was unforgettable, so powerful that even years later people call it one of the best stand-up moments ever captured on film. Steve Harvey, by contrast, was the host, the one who introduced the acts, told a few jokes, but didn't own the stage in the same way. When Katt Williams reminded people of that, it stung, because deep down, fans already knew Bernie Mac was a standout, while Steve Harvey benefited from being part of the package. And then came Mark Curry, another respected comedian, stepping in to say the same thing. Mark Curry accused Steve Harvey of stealing not once, but repeatedly. According to Mark Curry, Steve Harvey took the concept of his show and passed it off as his own. Worse, Steve Harvey even used Mark Curry's Halloween comedy material live on TV, passing it off as his own story. Mark Curry said he watched it happen in disbelief. He said, "You didn't need to do that. You already had enough. You already made enough." The accusation was sharp, and it echoed what Katt Williams had already said. Steve Harvey built himself up, but not always through originality. That's why the Ed Lover story about Bernie Mac hit so hard. According to Ed Lover, Bernie Mac confided in him that when he landed his role in Ocean's 11, Steve Harvey tried to undercut him. The claim was simple but explosive. Steve Harvey allegedly called the producers, offering to take the role for less money, hoping they would replace Bernie Mac with him. But the producers refused. To fans, it wasn't just gossip, it was a pattern. When Katt Williams brought this up, it felt believable, because it matched everything else. So now, years later, when Steve Harvey goes on camera and talks about podcasts being reckless, when Steve Harvey lectures about brand protection, when Steve Harvey calls out Katt Williams for spreading negativity, it rings hollow. Fans remember too much. They remember the whispers about Bernie Mac, the accusations from Mark Curry, the bitterness in his voice whenever Katt Williams' name comes up. They remember Shannon Sharpe sitting across from Katt Williams on Club Shay Shay, letting him speak freely, while Steve Harvey acted as though it was betrayal. But to the public, was Shannon Sharpe really betraying anyone? Or was he just doing his job as a podcaster, giving a comedian a platform to tell his truth? The reality is this: Katt Williams moved on. Katt Williams has continued touring, performing, staying booked and busy. Steve Harvey is the one still circling back, still comparing careers, still counting his 9 million listeners, still talking about being on another level. But audiences today don't measure greatness by who has the biggest following. They measure greatness by who has the truth. And in that viral interview, it was Katt Williams who looked like the truth-teller. And when you bring in Bernie Mac, the comparison gets even worse for Steve Harvey. Bernie Mac is remembered as fearless, original, and authentic. Steve Harvey is remembered as careful, calculated, and often accused of being willing to throw others under the bus. Mark Curry says it. Ed Lover says it. Katt Williams says it. Fans say it. And no matter how many times Steve Harvey tells the world he's the #1 radio host, those shadows follow him. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about radio ratings or FCC rules. This is about legacy. And while Steve Harvey may have money, fame, and TV shows, the question people keep asking is, what will his legacy really be? Will he be remembered as the host who climbed higher than anyone else? Or as the man who could never escape the voices of Katt Williams, Bernie Mac, Mark Curry, and Shannon Sharpe, who all directly or indirectly expose him?